Hello and welcome to today's video. This time I'm delighted to be joined by my friend Scott Wayland here. Now Scott is an ex-BBC prop maker and technician, and we're here to talk about his rather special Dalek. So sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Okay then Scott, so once again thanks very much for joining us today and allowing us to have a look at your rather amazing Dalek. So we'll get on to the history of this particular Dalek in a minute, but first of all, could you tell us how you first got involved in, well, the world of special effects?
Well, that's a really difficult question, but it started from a very, very young age.
All right, yeah.
My dad worked in films as a set builder, charge hand, and I come from a very artistic background. As a young person, I was always making things.
Yeah.
And
sort of like Airfix kits and things like that?
Not Airfix kits so much.
No?
I used to like to make things from anything that you could find.
Right, from scratch, yeah.
I discovered BBC visual effects through a TV show called Blake 7.
Ah, yes.
Which literally lit the touch paper for me.
Yeah.
And Blue Peter, when they showed you how to make teleport bracelets.
Yeah.
It all fell into place. That I knew then that's what I wanted to do.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
So, Daleks, of course, played a big part in that and gave me the drive to try and find out more about getting involved in that kind of work.
Yeah.
So I wrote a letter to the head of BBC Visual Effects, Tony Harding.
Tony Harding, right, yeah.
And he came back to me. I was blown away by the fact he'd actually taken the time to write back to me.
Yeah.
And so I went to my school teacher and said, look, this is what I want to do. Can you show me what I need to study, where I need to focus my efforts to try and achieve it? And that's basically how it started. And then I went in a completely different direction after my parents moved us to a different area and different school.
Yeah. And
it kind of fell by the wayside for a while. And I went into a completely different line of work, which I didn't enjoy at all.
Right.
Well, not very much.
No.
So I wrote to Tony Harding again.
Yeah.
And he was still there, and he wrote back to me and said, why don't you come in and do a week's work experience? So
would this have been in the 80s, would it? Like late 80s?
This was in the 90s.
In the 90s, okay, yeah.
So I took a week's leave and I went and did a week's work experience and got involved in making all sorts of minor things for TV shows that were in production at that time.
Yeah.
And
what sort of shows were that? Do you remember any of those?
It was The Phoenix and the Carpet, the remake of that.
Oh yeah,
was one of the shows that was going on. There was all sorts going on in the background. Noel's House Party, The Generation Game. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah.
So at the end of the week, I got offered a 3-month contract, and I took a leap of faith. I took a 5-year career break from my job in the civil service at that time, and I never ever went back.
Right.
So I continued as a contractor, working on various shows, making all sorts of props. Had lots of fun on live television. Yeah. Especially Noel's House Party.
So you worked on that quite some time, didn't you?
I worked on that for 2 years.
Yeah.
And had some of the best times of my life, albeit very hard work.
Yeah.
Nothing ever has come close to the excitement I experienced working on that show.
Because didn't that go out live on a Saturday night?
Live every Saturday.
Yeah. So that's a lot of pressure, isn't it?
It was a hell of a lot of pressure, a lot of thinking on your feet. If you made a mistake, you know, a lot could come back on you.
Yeah. Were you involved in like the gunge tank?
Yeah. Saturday mornings we used to have to mix up 4 or 5 dustbins full of different coloured gunge.
Yeah.
That was part of your Saturday morning job before the rehearsals started. And by the end of the rehearsals, you know, you'd filled all the tanks with a different coloured gunge for the evening. That was part of it, but it was the clearing away afterwards that wasn't so much fun.
Right, yeah, I can imagine.
So yeah, and I managed to work there until the sad demise of the department, on and off as a contractor, and also working for other companies as a freelancer.
Yeah.
And I've continued to this day to do some model making, prop making.
Yeah.
But obviously I moved into a different direction when the department closed and started a brewery, as you do.
Which is where we are now,
but I still do a little bit of prop making on the side because it's in my blood and it kind of keeps me grounded and sane. If you know, I need to do it because otherwise I get bored.
Oh no, that makes perfect sense. Okay, Scott, so that's your early origins in the world of special effects. How did that lead into your involvement with Doctor Who and the Daleks?
Well, because a colleague of mine at the time, Mike Tucker, who I became friends with, knew my passion and interest for the show, and particularly props on the show.
Yeah.
And when the opportunity arose, I was very lucky that he contacted me to come and work on his team.
Brilliant.
And that's where it
So this was
began.
The modern version of the show, the revitalised version. And this is when, leading right up to, well, I think it's episode 5, Dalek, when the first Daleks come back.
Yeah, episode 6.
Yeah, I mean, that was a momentous moment in the world of Doctor Who. And as a fan, it was really, I mean, it was one of the real highlights of that first season. And so you were involved in actually building those original Daleks.
Yeah, and we had a very short time scale in which to do it. There was 4 of us, including Mike.
Yeah.
We had a drawing, and we had to produce this new Dalek within, I think it was 3 weeks.
So obviously the basic Dalek design is there, but these are for the next century, aren't they? These are Daleks Plus.
I think the idea was to keep as close to the original classic design as possible, because it would have been a mistake to deviate from that too much.
Yeah.
But we made improvements. The designer, enhanced and refined certain aspects, and just made it a better version of the classic, I think, but whilst retaining that classic look. And I don't think it can be improved upon from this particular design, personally. No,
it's fantastic. Now, the origins of the Dalek we're looking at today, I call him the Exploding Dalek. You made a mould, didn't you, off those originals, just for yourself, which was the Black Dalek, yeah?
That's right. It was a case of 3 of us making different sections. We used an existing skirt, and then I took all the new parts away, of which I made some, including the fender at the bottom and this part up here.
Yeah.
And then I took them back to my workshop, and I made the original moulds myself, from which the new parts were all cast.
Right.
And once that was all done and the project was finished, further down the road, I still had all my notes, dimensions, and the original plugs I'd made, and some of the moulds I'd made. And I decided to make one more, just to keep.
No, I've seen some photos of that one. Yeah, I mean that particular Dalek just looks absolutely amazing.
Well, the intention was to keep that forever, to keep it in the family. I just wanted to have it. I mean, who wouldn't? And I had the opportunity to do it and the time to do it. So I made one perfect Black Dalek, which used to be this
one. Yeah, that was its origin, in effect. And then that Black Dalek never got used on screen as it was then, but didn't you have like a last-minute call where they needed a Dalek in a hurry? Yeah,
the special effects supervisor on the show, Danny Hargreaves, who I'd made props for previously, called me and said, we need a Dalek to blow up, but we need it within the next week or so. Right. And I said, well, there's no way I can do that in such a short time frame. So I said, let me have a think about it. And I knew the only way I was going to achieve that, and I didn't want to let them down, was to sacrifice the only one I had.
That must have been agonising.
It was, but it was on the basis, okay, I'll sacrifice the one I built to keep. You can make use of it, but I'd like to have it back afterwards, please. But afterwards, it would have been screen used, so it would have been a bit more special.
So then you had to basically take a knife to it and make it so they could explode.
Well, also bearing in mind some parts had to be remade for safety purposes, because it was going to be blown apart, even though there were safety wires to stop fragments from travelling too far. There's always that small risk that someone might have been struck by something. So for example, this was recreated in a softer plastic that was flexible, that wouldn't break. And these were replaced with dummy arms that were softer plastics rather than metals. So making it lighter so it would also blow apart more easily. We also had to line the interior with tin plate to make it able to resist multiple blasts. But it started essentially with a white paint marker and deciding where we're going to make the cut marks.
And they're really distinctive, aren't they? From this, up close, we can see it quite distinctive where it was taken apart.
Essentially, you're considering that you're going to be using a jigsaw and trying to find a path through with the least obstruction, but also giving it a kind of jagged edged look.
Yeah.
So I knew the shot was going to be from the front, so I kind of just started here. There are some photographs to demonstrate this.
Yeah.
And I continued around the prop. The top was remade and again cut. You can
see the lines,
in some of the lines that are actually already inlaid in the existing design.
Yeah.
The internal neck bin within here, which contains the mechanism for the head to rotate, had to be removed. And this matting in here was all cut through.
Yeah.
And then bolts and brackets fiberglassed in various points so that it could easily be assembled, and then the bolts removed prior to blowing it apart.
How many times was it actually exploded then?
I don't actually know.
Sure. Were you on the set when they were doing the filming of that?
No, I wasn't.
So they had like a separate pyrotechnics team who were doing all the explosions?
Yeah, Real SFX, which is fronted by Danny Hargreaves, I believe, is still the same.
Yeah.
Same team.
So they looked after it actually on the set.
Yeah. I believe I delivered it to Cardiff.
Okay then, Scott, so it was used in Asylum of the Daleks. That was in 2012. So that was its first screen appearance and it was blown up a few times. Then it got called back again the following year for the anniversary, the 50th anniversary special Day of the Doctor. So how did that happen? Was that last minute again?
Well, the prop had been returned to me since having been used in Asylum of the Daleks.
Yeah.
When it was pulled backwards on a rope and blown apart in that classic scene.
Yeah.
And then it was returned, and I thought that was the end of it. It looked slightly different then, with some different sort of spattered colours all over it. And I had another phone call saying, can we use it again for the 50th anniversary?
Yeah.
So I said yes. Well, the damage is already done.
True. Yeah. And had you repaired any of it at all, or
there was a few
little bits?
A few of the hemispheres were replaced.
Yeah.
I actually can't remember. There may have been a few repairs. I probably would have done. I'd have got it back to a fairly presentable state. But it is a pretty robust prop in any respect.
Yeah. So was it another like 3-week turnaround, or even less than that?
It went off. I don't remember how long it went for, but I know they did various different effects with it, including cutting a hole in the other side and rotating it 360 degrees on a scaffold rig.
And I think it got set on fire as well.
It got set on fire several times. And this rather durable rubber matting in here, you can see there's a classic scene where the flames protruding out.
Yeah.
Looks absolutely stunning, I think, that shot.
Yeah.
Was used in the trails for the 50th anniversary show.
Yeah.
So it was seen over and over. That's right, it was used for the various shots. And I think we actually went to Cardiff to collect it from the set.
Right, okay.
I remember taking my kids when they were very little.
Yeah.
And we had a little walk around the set, and I got some photos of them on the TARDIS console.
Right.
And spoke to David Tennant with
That's it. So this particular Dalek is signed by Tom Baker and David Tennant, two doctors.
Yeah. I wasn't on the sets at the time or involved in anything other than supplying the prop. But it was returned to me, signed on top by Tom Baker and David Tennant on the other side.
Brilliant, yeah, fantastic.
As a thank you for loaning it to
them. Superb,
so
yeah.
That kind of adds to it.
Absolutely. But that still wasn't quite the end, because then it was used at the 50th sort of exhibition. Was it at the Excel?
That's correct.
Yeah, and they were doing like live special effect
on
demonstrations.
Stage, demonstration. Yeah, it just won't die. This Dalek. I mean, it just won't die. It is built to survive pretty much anything. And you know, if they picked up the phone tomorrow and said, "Scott, look, we need to use it again," it'd be quite straightforward to put it back in use. It is built to withstand it. It is getting, as you can see, it's missing a few bits and pieces, but these could easily be replaced.
If needed,
It's authentic as it stands.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important to leave it exactly as it is for now.
I would agree. Yeah.
But yes, it was blown apart on many times over and over again at Excel on the stage in front of a live audience.
Yeah.
but it was just simply on wires with a couple of flash puff cartridges and some pushers in there, I think, some kind of mechanism to blow it apart. It wasn't the full-on pyrotechnic experience with petrol and stuff, because obviously it was in front of a live audience. Yeah. But it did take a bit of a hammering, but as you can see, it's still. But it is very much authentic and straight from the screen.
Now, there's a great YouTube channel called Dalek 63 to 88. It has stacks of fantastic videos looking at the history of the Daleks and related Doctor Who props and locations in incredible detail. I've been a fan of the channel since I first came across it, and I'm delighted that its creator, Gavin, has given us permission to use a segment from one of his videos where he looks in detail at the Daleks used in Asylum of the Daleks, including Scott's exploding one. I'll link to the full video in the description down below.
Now, if you look down at your notes, I assume you've been making notes, and tally up the casings we've looked at, you will discover we have only reached 5, and I promised 6. And yet, we have covered every Dalek seen on screen. How can this be? Well, the final prop we have to mention is something of a tragic tale, and a bit of a grey area in the old prop spotting business. There is one more replica Dalek, technically, on screen. If we pause this footage, it is here. And here, and here, and here, and here. We wouldn't normally include an FX Dalek in a list of hero props. However, in this instance, the lines are blurred because this wasn't built to be destroyed. It had lived a full and happy life up to this point. During the shoot in the Asylum, when the time drew near to set up an explosive moment when a Dalek would self-destruct, FX supervisor Danny Hargreaves turned to his colleague Scott Wayland, who had previously made dummy casings to be blown up in the Stolen Earth. Scott's involvement in new series Daleks actually went back to 2005, as he was part of the team that built the original new series Dalek with Mike Tucker, as seen here. As a result of this, Scott had his own black Dalek, which was cast from the same original moulds as the first bronze Dalek. Its provenance was therefore so impeccable that it's wrong really to call it a replica, because it was built with the same resources that made the first authentic TV Dalek of the 21st century. The result was an absolutely pristine casing in black, although thankfully lacking the ID insignia, which would have made it yet another Dalek Sec. So, when Scott was called upon to supply a prop which could be blown up in the Asylum, it was soon realised that the deadline was too tight to construct a new FX dummy from scratch, so instead, Scott elected to sacrifice his own beautiful Dalek prop. Scott marked out cut lines in white, and then took the power tools to his gorgeous creation, which produced jagged fractures so that it would break apart easily. He also mounted brackets so that the sections could be bolted back together. The interior was fitted with metal plates to contain the blast and protect the casing. The prop's hemispheres were given a slight spray of bronze, and it was splattered with rust-coloured weathering, perhaps to suggest that it was really bronze underneath with a layer of black soot or grime on top. Surprisingly, this catastrophic screen debut was not also the end of its televisual career. Because the fiberglass sections had been reinforced with steel, the components of the prop were salvaged and it could be pieced back together with relative success. Asylum of the Daleks director, Nick Hurren, would return to Doctor Who a year later in the spring of 2013 to helm the production of the anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor. The Daleks fittingly returned to celebrate 50 years of their rivalry with the Time Lord in an episode that was filled with explosive action. Scott Wayland's disassembled Dalek came in very handy for two notable moments. In the episode's dramatic opening, when a Dalek was knocked on its side, it was portrayed horizontally by two different casings in quick succession. The first was a distressed hero prop belonging to the BBC, which we'll profile in the next instalment of our Asylum investigation. But the second prop is Scott's sliced up Dalek, with its distinctive jagged cut marks allowing impressive pyrotechnic work to blaze through. An alternative angle of this same effect was used later in the episode, with the footage run backwards to represent time rewinding or changing history or something. I don't know what's going on in that bit. The rather confusing scene continues as the Doctors unite to use their sonics as a repulsion beam or force field or something. It's never explained. And a Dalek is blasted backwards and sent tumbling through the 3D painting, although that's really not clear what's going on. Although this is only briefly seen on screen, this was a very complex practical effect, and it again used the sliced up prop. Scott's jigsaw puzzle Dalek was bolted together and mounted onto a pole, which allowed it to pivot and create the slow roll through the air. The shooting of such effects in camera was an important factor in creating believable visuals which looked especially impressive in 3D. The prop's career continued live on stage, as the Real FX company used it to demonstrate their craft at the 50th anniversary event, where it was blown apart once again, this time in front of a live audience.
You will be exterminated! Exterminate! Exterminate!
Right then, Scott, so the time has come for you and this exploding Dalek to part ways.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why we're here today, to sort of give a bit of history about it. What's made you make that decision?
Well, I've owned it now for a considerable amount of time. It does take up an awful amount of space.
They certainly do, yeah.
As you know, I've made a replacement pristine Dalek. So I don't think anyone really needs
two Daleks.
Or
should be happy with just the one, yeah?
I'll be happy with just the one. I worry about it, and I want to make sure it's safe and secure with someone who's going to look after it. I think it's an important piece of history.
Absolutely.
And it needs a new home now. We're looking for the right person that will take care of it and keep it as it is.
Well, it'll be the pride of any Doctor Who collection, that's for certain.
Who's got the space for it? Because
yeah, that's a big concern.
But there is the benefit that it does come apart into rather a lot of smaller pieces.
That's true. That's true.
Essentially, though, I've fixed it back together, but it still splits in half, so you can get it through a standard doorway. The top lifts off quite easily, as you can see.
Yeah.
And then this section lifts off. This section can be split into 2, 3, 4 parts if you wish. So yeah, it would fit in pretty much anywhere.
Okay.
Needs to be nicely lit, well looked after. But it's time to let it go. Right, as you can see, the neck bin from inside was removed because these parts are all cut, so it could fly away.
Right.
So let's start with the top.
Yeah.
This was a newly cast fiberglass top, which was filled with a hard foam, and then cut in these areas here so that it could fly apart. We kept the original aluminium housing for the ears, as I like to call them, so that they didn't shatter on impact with the ground. The lenses that were inside are replaced with this clear rubber, again, so that wouldn't break. This has all been tacked back together inside, internally, and I've put a simple keeper of plywood in here.
I see.
To help to hold the shape together, which is removable.
Yeah.
But other than that, that's minimalist work, keeping it as authentic as possible. So that lifts off.
Yeah.
So this leaves you with the next section. This is all plywood, and these are all the original castings. The struts here, the tops of which obviously have become damaged as this has been blown apart several times. There's some still some old firing lines in there for the the charges, flash puffs, whatever was used. Again, this has all been, you can see the charring in here from a little set of light. It still blackens your hands if you touch it. That's been set on fire quite a few times.
Yeah.
It's all held together with cable ties. So it could be broken apart again and reused, should that time ever come.
Yeah.
So this comes off. Then we're into the middle section. As you can see, the operator's handles have been removed. The dummy arms put in place because they're safer.
Yeah.
And then we put in metal plates here for blast impact, because the charges would have been placed inside here.
Yeah.
The metal plate is missing from there, but I do have that, which will come with it. And these bolts hold it together whilst it's in transit from one location to another, but you can quite easily undo these to reset it.
I see.
If they wanted to use it again, which I hope doesn't happen, because I think it's had its fair share of...
Yeah. It's been through the wars, hasn't it?
Certainly has.
The Dalek wars.
The arms are removed, the handle's obviously gone, and these are just dummied up. But yeah, it could technically be reinstated, but they could also be reused. But I think it's had its fair share of wear and tear.
And this one never had a man or an actor go inside?
No, but it was made for an operator. I did build it as the original studio Daleks were, to the same exacting standard. So you can see the shelves here where the seat was, but all of this was stripped out when its purpose, when it became repurposed.
Yeah.
So as the lining continues down here, it's all lined with metal. It's very, very strong. The actual fiberglass sections were thicker than normal as well, because I made this one to keep, and I wanted to make it a really good quality. So it actually loaned itself ultimately to the purpose it ended up fulfilling. And if you look down inside there, you can see there's very heavy steel bars, the wheels connected to, which we've reinstated. So it is possible to push it around.
Indeed. Just focusing on the outside a little bit now.
Yeah, most of these have survived.
Yeah.
These are cast in solid resin, each one hand cut to fit the contours as you go around, because the angles alter. There's quite a bit of detail that's been damaged over the times it's impacted with the floor. There is a cracked one here, which I think is quite amazing that and the front one are the only two that have incurred any serious damage.
Yeah.
You can see how neatly this was all cut.
Absolutely.
And joined in originally. And all these little details were added to the design by Nick Cool, an excellent prop maker who worked on the originals as part of the team we were on, which lifted the design from the original 1960s. So there's lots of little elements of detail in here that sometimes get missed. The little rings around the edge, of course, added an extra element of work creating them.
I mean, did you say there was 50s?
There's 56.
56 of those, yeah.
And these were originally a seal from a commercial vehicle.
Yeah.
But obviously these have been moulded and fixed with nuts and bolts, set into a solid resin casting.
Wow.
These are stainless steel, little detail rivets to make it look more mechanical and machine-like, as it is essentially a hard casing for a creature living inside. And all of these can be removed and replaced if necessary.
Yeah, so it's missing one of the roundels there.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting story.
Where it was on the bit of scaffold and being
they needed
twisted
to
around.
Spin it around.
Yeah,
which I believe is some video footage.
There is indeed
of this effect, which was quite a technical effect, quite complicated. A lot of work would have gone into
so that's how they actually did it. That's fantastic.
It was put on a gimbal, or a rod, stainless steel, not stainless, I apologise, scaffold bar.
A bit of a scaffold,
It was put on here on a jig that could spin the whole prop 360 degrees. So that's the original hole.
Brilliant.
That they'd have cut.
Oh, fantastic. Just going to go around the back a bit more.
And again, this section lifts away.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And you can see inside. That's heavy. You can see the metal has been burned, the galvanised coatings kind of gone powdery. And these are where the hemispheres are all bolted on individually.
Ah, yeah.
By hand. And that again was the ledge for the seat.
For the operator, yeah.
You can see those lines inside, the cut lines. But in order to make it a little more rigid, I fitted a bar across here and fiberglass those in just to help to give it some durability for the rest of its life. But, you know, if ever they used it again, it'd be very easy just to cut through here and
there you go.
Restore it to use.
So these are some of the bits that's from Scott's workshop, and a lot of these are taken from the original molds, and they're like his templates and that. Now we're going to do a little competition, so if you're happy to share this video on your social media, share it to all your Doctor Who friends, people who might be interested in having a look at an actual screen used Dalek and owning one, you're in with a chance of winning a box of these goodies, which have come straight from Scott's workshop. He said you can have them authentic, or you have them painted up as if they just come off a fresh Dalek. So have a little look, because there's loads of good stuff in here which should be of interest, all straight from the Daleks. There we are. Well, if you are seriously interested in making Scott an offer for his exploding Dalek, with all the provenance that comes with it, and all the other bits and pieces, and you know, all the photographs, you've got some plans and bits and pieces as well. In the first instance, just drop me an email at julesburt@gmail.com, and I can always forward your correspondence on to Scott. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this little look at the exploding Dalek. Now don't forget, you can get in contact with me in the email address on the screen now if you are interested in Scott's Dalek, and don't forget to enter that competition. Let's spread this video far and wide. Thanks once again to my friend Scott for coming along and allowing us to film his fantastic Dalek. It really is something quite special. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. Do please hit the subscribe button if you've not already for regular vintage Doctor Who content, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye.